Welcome back to another episode of the Black Squadron podcast, our Acolyte series for episode 7. I'm BP, and joining me is only Todd.
We miss Mari, but I'm here to hold it down for you. Hopefully, I can't believe this series is almost over.
I can't either. I think Darth Mari's not here because she's just distraught that it's almost over.
She's trying to. If she doesn't show up on our recap episodes, then the series has to continue, right?
Yeah. I think that's in Disney and Lucasfilm's contract.
Yeah, Darth Mari has to be on each Black Squadron episode.
So we had the 7th episode this week. I can't believe it's almost over. I still don't know 7 of the 8 episodes and where we're going, how we're going to get there in one episode. Do you?
I'm like, what is it? Like just hanging on the edge.
Yeah.
Like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, where he's hanging off the side of that AC-130.
Yeah,
that's how I feel. Like I'm just along for the ride. I have no idea where we're going, no idea what to expect in the finale. We did at least get some answers to some questions in this week's episode, but I still feel like I have a million more questions. So
yeah. How does Chimera fit into this at all at this point?
What and how they're gonna wrap everything up in one more episode? We can get into it, but I've got some thoughts on that when we dive into this.
All right. Well, I guess let's just kick off our boots and dive right in.
So this week's episode is titled Choice. I think during our recaps we've done ever since episode 3, we kind of thought that this was going to be the episode that kind of complemented episode 3. It's directed by Kaganada again, who was the director of episode 3. Episode 3 was titled Destiny. This is titled Choice. So again, we're getting those kind of complementary titles that we've seen throughout this series. I feel like the use of choice there's a lot more to it than what we saw in, or at least what we're initially seeing. What do you think? Like, obviously choice has ramifications in the Star Wars universe for a lot of characters. Do you think that was something they decided to reference when naming this, or do you think it's just they needed something to complement the title of episode 3, Destiny?
I think that the name Choice is ironic. I think it's done in irony because the Jedi is giving Osha a choice, but in the end, did they?
Did they? For me, it reminds me a lot of the Phantom Menace, and it almost gives me kind of a new way of looking at the Phantom Menace with the idea of choice and Qui-Gon Jinn. Did Qui-Gon give Anakin a choice, really?
Really?
Anakin could have stayed on Tatooine, but he gave him the choice to leave. Qui-Gon told Anakin that his mother couldn't come, but he probably could have. He made an effort to only bring Anakin. So this episode, there's some very strong parallels between, I think, Soul in this episode and what we saw with him and some of the decisions that Qui-Gon made.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was really cool. I love a little nod to the Phantom Menace. But before we dive into the actual episode itself, like we've done every recap so far this season, first word, what do you think of this episode? What comes to mind?
Boy, oh man, I don't know. Like I told you this right before we started recording. I felt like a lot of this episode could have been in episode 3, and we'd have been fine. Terms of story, so I generally don't have a single word.
Just why?
Why? I guess
that's fair. For me, I think when I think of this episode, I think of I don't know, this one I definitely struggled to have a word that I could think of. I almost feel like you said, lack of choice is more like not just one word, but a couple of words. Lack of choice, I think of a lot when I think of this episode. But the episode itself, we're going, like we kind of been referencing as we started this off, 16 years ago, since the events of the show on Brendok, we're getting another flashback episode, kind of the other side of the story. Now we're seeing things from the Jedi's perspective, the Jedi's point of view. The Jedi are on Brendok. They're not there to kidnap kids like we thought. Like they're there for completely unrelated reasons to why May and Osha and the witches are there. They're investigating potential vergences in the Force, which could create life. This is an interesting concept. What do you think about the introduction of these vergences? I know in the High Republic there's some other stuff that's kind of complements this, but correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not super familiar with the High Republic. This is the first time that this idea of like a vergence in the Force has kind of been introduced, right?
In live action, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's great that they did incorporate that, though. It's like they knew what happened in episode 3 was going to be a problem on the internet. So this is kind of like the way to like see if you'd have just waited for the story to play out, you'd have known. But then again, goes back to what I just said. If this was in episode 3 instead of episode 7, we wouldn't even need to have been here.
I get that. I think having it played like I go back and forth on the placement of this episode, because I think that a lot of the stuff hits a lot harder having seen the story up to this point, but also there's some stuff that is kind of like, this almost feels like it should have been in like a little sooner or closer to episode 3. So we're getting the Jedi around Brendok. They're looking for this vergence of the Force. Obviously they're on a planet that had no previous life and now is teeming with life. So kind of Jedi like, hey, we want in on some of that action. If we can find this vergence of the Force, we can utilize that to our advantage. We see a lot of the same events from episode 3, but like I said, from the Jedi's perspective. So this episode kind of follows everything that we see with the witches and Brendok, the ascension ceremony, the fire that eventually burns down the witch coven. Baby Torben was very interesting, to say the least. He almost felt like that spoiled rich kid that is doing like missionary work kind of thing. Like you hear about him, like they go to another country and it's really more like tourism than it is like missionary work. Like he's not doing this job, but he wants to be back on Coruscant. He wants to get out of there. He's like, I don't want to do this. This isn't for me.
Yeah. Have they said where Torben's from? Like which planet? Do we know yet? Because I feel like he might be from Coruscant with that attitude he had.
I was gonna say, I don't know off the top of my head. I think Coruscant, but he definitely has that like silver spoon in his mouth kind of
for sure
energy. That's the energy he's bringing to the table. So he was interesting in this episode. We do get to see the mind control scene, the whole him black eyes falling down kind of thing. That was really interesting. Listening to Mother Anastasia kind of whispering in his ear was really interesting. I almost wonder, because this can't be the first time that a Force user has had this ability to kind of enter someone's mind. Do you think that this is something else that other dark side users have used? Maybe obviously Palpatine it was known to influence others. Do you think to some degree maybe some of this is what those people were experiencing with Palpatine?
For sure. Yeah, I think that definitely there's been a lot of mind control or alterations happening throughout the entirety of Star Wars, whether it's been flat out said or not.
It is interesting how much they've leaned into like mind games and mind play in this series, because you have the stuff with Torben, or not Torben. You have the stuff with Mother Anastasia and Torben. You have Indara doing a little bit of stuff with that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
You have Soul with the prisoners, like, tell me what you know kind of thing. So it's interesting to see how much the Jedi are kind of using the mind play stuff, whereas we only, we see Jedi mind tricks kind of here and there in other Star Wars projects.
They've done Cal Neka dirty this entire series. But
I think they have a moment that's pretty cool with Cal Neka, but I can definitely see you're missing your Jedi Wookiee a little bit. Another big thing with this episode, obviously, is Soul and kind of this I need to save Osha energy that he brings to the episode. And almost the blinding element of it. Like, I need to do this. Like, there's nothing. I have to do this. It's interesting seeing him. And again, I was talking about kind of the parallels to Qui-Gon, where once Soul sets his mind on something, he is set on doing it, regardless of the possible ripple effect from interfering. What were your thoughts on seeing Soul kind of gung ho and his I need to save the Osha kind of thing?
I mean, Soul and Torben both felt so uncharacteristic of the Jedi, particularly for during that time. It just one was crying about working and wanting to go home, and Soul was tunnel visioned on saving one of the twins, not both, which I thought was very weird.
Well,
I'm sure we'll get into this later, but when they're in the mix and Soul and other people are, talking, and May runs in and he turns around, looks dead at her, and goes, "OSHA!" Like it felt so like it felt like a blooper that snuck through.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because I don't know. Soul's an interesting character. Like you feel like Soul could do no wrong throughout, and then like slowly that's kind of fallen apart with each episode. So it is interesting seeing kind of his character fall apart so much in this episode and be so set on doing what he thinks is right.
Yeah.
Like out listening to anybody, which we've seen other Jedi do that. Obviously, Anakin doing what he thinks is the right thing to save Padme.
A ton of lying.
A ton. The Jedi are such liars. Which I'm sure Mari is listening to this, like just screaming, "Liar, liar!" So another thing that we get is we see the testing of the twins from the Jedi's perspective this time. We obviously see in episode 3 them taking the blood samples, testing the M counts. We get the results of those M counts this time around and find out that they are extremely high, but that they aren't twins, that they're one being or one consciousness split into two bodies. So this, I've got all kinds of crazy theories around this. What were your, obviously the big thing is this, people were freaking out that the creation of the twins kind of invalidated Anakin's creation as the chosen one. This obviously being the fact that they were artificially created. They're one consciousness, two bodies. Like there's some other things at play, whether this is a vergence of the Force that created them. I thought this whole concept was really interesting. What were your thoughts about the fact that the twins are actually one split into two?
My mind kind of blew for a second. I had a couple thoughts when they were talking about the vergence in the Force, and then everything we see towards the end of this episode with Mother Anastasia. I had a thought for a moment. Maybe she was the vergence in the Force, and that's why she was able to create the twins.
Interesting.
But then, I mean, yeah. I don't want to say it because we'll get to it, but I felt it was a very interesting revelation. That was for certain. And I wanted to say, because I made such a big deal about this when we first started these series, Carrie-Anne Moss in the episode, in the moments in this episode, I didn't even realize it was Carrie-Anne Moss. I mean, I knew obviously it was her, but it felt like Indara.
Yeah. No, I think she did a great job of not feeling like Trinity and Star Wars.
Exactly.
Which, the little bit that we got her in the first episode felt very much like that because she was just doing martial arts stuff.
Exactly.
But this very much felt like Carrie-Anne Moss playing Indara, not just Carrie-Anne Moss.
Yeah, so, it wasn't taken out for a second. I thought she did a great job, a wonderful job even.
It is interesting that she was the voice of reason throughout this whole episode, to a degree. Everything from a certain point of view, exactly. Yeah. So you do see, obviously, Soul. I don't think Soul's a master at this point. I think he's just a knight.
No, I'm pretty sure that Indara was the only master at the time.
Yeah. You see the small comments that she makes, like, this is why I have a Padawan and you don't. Soul's obvious issues with attachments. He's very attached to OSHA, even though he can't identify OSHA. So there's the elements that make Indara a master are very much put on display. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with her that we see.
Yeah. We've actually seen the true any Jedi that we've seen so far in this series. I don't think we've actually seen them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like the front almost.
Versions of them.
Yeah, well, it's like what the Jedi want to project rather than
Exactly.
who the Jedi are, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, again, the whole point of the show is to show the
Yeah.
downfall of the Jedi, like what led from this moment of great peace and prosperity of the Jedi to the Phantom Menace. So, and I think they're doing a great job of telling that story, laying the foundation, starting to put those cracks into the Jedi, introducing the politics element a little bit more, and how even the Jedi will fall to their own hubris to upholding the Jedi and the Jedi way.
Yeah.
So very, very Jedi culty vibes, which
They don't feel like a unit, like the entire Jedi Order that we've gotten in the series. It just feels like it's each individual Jedi out for themselves, whether they want to say that out loud or not. But it's pretty obvious that they have this propaganda version of themselves and then their true selves.
Yeah, well, it almost feels like there's varying levels to the Jedi. Like there's the High Council, which is the pinnacle of all the Jedi, which even them, we know those people don't always tell the full truth. And then you got like these subgroups like Venestra and Indara and all of these other Jedi that are kind of they're upholding the idea of the Jedi, but not necessarily the values and the beliefs of the Jedi. They're kind of upholding what they believe is a Jedi.
Yeah.
Obviously, we get Soul wants to train Osha, train the twins. So Indara's like, we gotta tell the council, and then Indara comes out and says that the council said no, too old. Not the first time the council has turned someone away. We saw it with Anakin.
I wonder if council actually said no.
I don't think she called the Jedi Council.
I don't think she did either.
I think that she did not want to interfere at all and use this as an excuse, as like, nope, sorry, Jedi put a kibosh on it.
Yep.
Not doing it. Because I don't believe that there was this would be something that would be marked in Osha's file, because they would have known all these events. If Indara had told the truth to the Jedi Council about the twins, about everything, then there would have been some indication that there was a sister, which so many of that group or so many other Jedi did not know that Osha had a twin.
Yeah.
Other half. So I don't believe that she called the Jedi Council.
Yeah, I don't either. Because I feel like if she had called the Jedi Council, this wasn't like an Anakin situation where it was a high med count. She literally said a consciousness split into two, put into like two kids. I feel like the council would have been like, hold on, let's talk about this.
Wait a second, where are you guys at?
Yeah, where are you?
Just the whole Jedi Council rolling up. Like, that's cool. We're here to investigate.
They're like, we're on the way. Hold up.
I almost wonder if Indara was looking out for the future of the Jedi in a way, like knew that there was something that wasn't right with the Witch Coven, with the children. Something just did not feel right. I think even Torben says something like about the twins.
Yeah,
like there's something not right here. Mm-hmm. So I almost wonder if Indara, trying to protect the Jedi, was like, we're gonna act like we didn't see anything. We're gonna act like nothing was here. We're gonna go about our business and enjoy our lives.
Yeah, maybe.
Very, very possible. Obviously, we then get to the events of the destruction of the Witch Coven, the burning of their home. Torben thinks that the twins are proof of a vergence in the Force, so he goes off to chase them. Soul goes after him. Indara and Kilnaka are like coming in, like, you guys go ahead. We'll come in the rear. We'll take care of it. Soul is sent to basically talk Torben off a cliff. Like, hey, get up, buddy. Like, let's get your Padawan self back here. You're acting a little reckless. But instead,
jumps with him.
He's like, listen, like, I'm with you. You're with me. We're a team on this one. They go into the coven. It's a mess. Everything's a mess. We see, obviously, some of the events before the fire. We see May and Osha going at it. We see the events of May lighting Osha's drawings on fire and then accidentally starting a fire. But I like the fact that we see now that it was an accident. Just a kid that was angry at her sister, wanted to destroy something that was personal to her sister, accidentally burned down their house. Happens to the best of us. Mother Coral is not a nice lady.
No,
She's a
yeah,
bad lady.
yeah.
Uh,
She was not feeling the Jedi.
which it's interesting looking at the dynamic of these witches because Mother Anastasia is held like as a leader of not just like she's not just the mother to the twins. She is the leader of the witches, the future of the witches. And when things are starting to go south, and she does her whole little like turning into a mist ghost thing, and then May turns into a mist ghost being to a degree, and then Soul kills Mother Anastasia. She says that she would have let Osha go. She was going to let the twins go away. I almost wonder because Anastasia is able to turn into that mist like creature. I don't know what how better way to describe it. And then May also does it.
Yeah,
If the twins or somehow there's a way that Mother Anastasia is more than just an individual. If Mother Anastasia is super old, like centuries and centuries and centuries old, so she's like the leader of the coven, and the leader has passed on from generation to generation to generation as the same consciousness put into a different body. So you have the ascension ceremony. We see May get the symbol on one side of her forehead. I'm assuming that Osha probably would have gotten the symbol on the other side.
yep.
And then Mother Anastasia, the leader,
Center.
has one right in the center. Obviously, the twins are a single consciousness split into two. Makes you wonder.
Did you notice when Mother Anastasia was starting to turn into the mist that her teeth were crazy sharp?
You know who else has crazy sharp teeth and is a force-like being?
The mother.
The mother that we talked about on our last podcast episode,
Yep.
Abeloth. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's anytime we get into like any kind of crazy force stuff, I always get jazzed because I'm like, yes, give me more, give me more. So it was interesting.
Can we talk about for a second? Why did Saul just put his lightsaber through her, like when she turned into mist?
I fear.
I guess he was just afraid of what was. I guess he looked over and saw that May started to do it too, thinking
Thought it was Osha.
Still.
Yeah.
But
well, and you also have to remember one thing, and I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the whole testing, is that when May and Osha are being tested by the Jedi to see if they're force sensitive, Indara asks May about the ascension ceremony, and May very much misremembers what her mother told her and makes it sound like it's much more intense.
Yeah.
Because Mother Anastasia is talking about, this is the ascension ceremony and you have to sacrifice a part of you. But when May is recalling that to Indara, she says that you have to sacrifice yourself. So I think you couple that with Soul being uneasy around the witches, with his fear that Osha, who he thinks is Osha, is something's happening to her. He wants to protect her. He lashes out. He strikes out. But yeah, the end of Mother Anastasia is unfortunately brought about by Soul, which Soul can do wrong. Soul used to do no wrong. Soul did all the wrong in this episode.
It was interesting he did that, and I immediately regretted it and refused to fight Mother Coral.
Yeah.
Took some shots.
Oh, yeah. I was like, man, this man can take some punishment.
He took that elbow directly to the nose and was just like, ugh.
I eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's interesting whenever we see these moments of Jedi giving in to that darker nature and then immediately regretting it. You see it with Luke in Return of the Jedi when he's fighting Vader. You see it with Luke in The Last Jedi when he thinks about striking down his nephew Ben Solo. You see it obviously with Soul. You see it even with Obi-Wan to a degree. And some stuff like when he was fighting Darth Maul, obviously he was fighting an enemy, but he taps into that dark side power. Yeah, Luke has a lot of every
Not so
time.
much,
Like,
too much to keep an eye on that guy.
he steps away from it, but he walks that line pretty heavily.
Yeah, he does.
So we get everything just kind of goes to craziness after Mother Anastasia dies. Like you said, Mother Coral fights Soul, and then she turns into a mist-like creature. You see all the other witches kind of disappear, and then you think something's happening, something's going wrong, something's not right with the whole mind stuff that happened to Torben. So you think that's about to happen again, and then,
dude, it was great because he's like, not again. He's like, no, my mind is fortified, and then she goes, his isn't. I was like, here we go. But I will,
so
before we even talk about it, I wanted to mention how sick Torben's lightsaber skills were against the arrows.
Oh yeah,
it was such a brief scene, but the choreography was intense, and it was
Mhm.
he did such a good job. And I really wanted to mention on the show because I think I've watched it 20 times just because of that sequence. But anyway, we after she says his isn't, and it pans to Kalmeka standing at the top of the stairs and looking like a kid who just threw up, trying to wake his mom up.
for me, it's like those horror movies. Like this show has done a decent job of kind of introducing some of those horror elements. So
Yeah.
it's like whenever they pan, it's like, what's that? What could that be? And it pans to like the top of the stairs, and it's like some supernatural being. The
Yeah.
fact that we got that same vibe, or the kid that just threw up kind of thing.
Yeah.
With Kelnaka standing at the top, super cool. Obviously, watching a Wookiee Jedi fight was insane. Like, just I'm glad we got something, because other than that, we really like the buildup of Kelnaka was so high, and then to not get a Jedi fight, like him fighting would have been tragic. So it was really cool fight scene with him. Again, we get a smidge, little bit of Kylo Ren's theme during this. What do you think that could mean? I have no idea.
I have no idea. I've been racking my brain. No clue. Only thing I can remember from it is the fact that he was straight up trying to crush Torben's skull against the wall. Like he was trying to like murder, not end him, murder.
Yeah.
That was brutal. And then Torben kind of walked it off. Like at the end of the episode, he's talking normally. His face is crushed and like half his eyes gone. He's like, yeah, we should probably so we get to go home, or
so we going home now? Yeah, the fight with the Kelnaka though was pretty cool. It was well done, very intense. Indara is able to break that. So again, you see those Jedi mind force abilities, and then you see all of the witches kind of just pass out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they die or not. That's the thing, is like there's no way to, I guess, tell if they died or if they're just all knocked unconscious, or what happened with that. So I wonder if that is going to somehow come into play.
If they did die, and Dara is the Sith Master.
Yeah.
Like, right? Because all she did was take them out of Kalnaka's head and kill them in a swoop with just her mind. That's power.
Yeah, but maybe it's something to do with the shared consciousness whenever they do something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I'm trying to think of, like, Carrie Moss, The Matrix. Like, when you die in The Matrix, you die in real life. Maybe if something happens when you're doing that force mind invasion thing, that if you're kicked out somehow, then that destroys your consciousness and is, in a sense, your life.
Maybe.
So possible. I don't know. And then obviously the episode wraps up with the scene where the twins are on the bridge that is collapsing. Soul is trying to save both of them. He makes a choice. Episode title drop right there. Well done. To save Osha over May. Do you think that he genuinely couldn't save both of them? Or do you think that he felt something with May that he was like, I'm going to let you kind of go away and I'm going to save your sister instead?
I don't know. I feel like it's always a choice for a Jedi, right? Because they could have caught one and used the Force to catch the other, or the Force to catch both, or knock them away from the abyss. Something could have happened,
or lift them up, or
or he was just so like into his emotions and fear and anxiety that he literally just didn't think of about being a Force user and just grabbed her.
Which, I mean, he did have a pretty intense fight.
Yeah, he got knocked in the face really hard.
I can imagine him being pretty exhausted at that point. So maybe it was just he was physically at his limit with the Force.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if maybe there was some kind of ulterior motive to just saving Osha, since he had such a strong connection to Osha, and wanted basically from the moment that he saw Osha to rescue her. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if there's more to that. And then at the very end, when they're on their way back to Coruscant, the Jedi all agree to lie and blame this all on May. So again, you kind of see what you're seeing with Vernestra, where she's like, we can't tell the council about any of this. We're going to do everything under the radar. You've got Indara deciding to lie, not tell the council about everything. Saul's willing to face the consequences of his actions. And they all kind of agree, like, no one saw anything. We're all going to stick to we all got our story straight. So it's an interesting ending. Interesting. I'm glad we got to see things from their point of view, because I think it does complement the third episode very well. Yeah. I do have some thoughts about this episode as a whole. I guess we'll start with you. As far as placement goes, I know you mentioned that you think this should have been closer to episode 3. Do you think that if they had either incorporated this into episode 3 or put it closer, or maybe had more episodes following, that this episode would have been a little better for you?
I think the episode would have felt better, honestly, if you had just swapped 6 and 7. In terms of the overall story, to end it at 8, because the end has to do with Chimera, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it has to
be involved there. So if you flip 6 and 7, that makes so much more sense, because it goes from 3 to 6, which is feels right.
Yeah.
And then sets up 7, then that would make the Stranger Chimera episode set up the finale, which makes the most sense to me.
I almost wonder if, because we've this was the issue for me with Book of Boba Fett, because Book of Boba Fett did something similar with these flashbacks, where it felt like things were moving, and then, well, they also used the Mando episodes too, but it felt like things were moving forward, the story was moving forward, and then they broke that with a flashback or with a Mando episode. That kind of had the same feeling for me with this episode in regards to the whole season, just because I know there's only one more episode left. And I almost feel like if they had done 3, 4, and 5 complement each other, so you keep those 2 together, and then you either add, truthfully, I feel like 6 could have been added to 5.
Yeah.
Or parts of it, or even I don't even know though, because the other thing with this episode that kind of drove me nuts after finishing it, I was hoping that they were going to cut to something, which I'm sure they will next week's episode, but I was hoping that they were going to cut whose perspective was telling the story. I'm assuming that it's Soul telling May, but also at the same time, Osha is putting on the helmet. So is this her connecting to the Force and seeing the story through that?
I have a theory. Because who looked relatively strong in this entire thing was Mother Coral. What if Mother Coral, as this Force spirit, mist, whatever, is in the Stranger's helmet? And that's when she put the helmet on, the breathing we hear wasn't hers. It could have been Coral's.
Interesting. So almost like,
because I feel like there has to be a connection between Chimera and May from Jump Street we haven't gotten yet.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's all connected.
Yeah, there's got to be. I guess this is my biggest issue with the episode is I don't know. This episode, I don't want to judge the finale yet, but I feel like this almost puts a lot of pressure on the finale.
A ton of pressure
to deliver, because they answered a lot of questions, but they also set up so much stuff the previous episodes that they have to finish.
If this finale is not 55 minutes plus, that's concerning.
Well, Leslie Headland has even said that this when they were creating the series, they made this first season have an ending. So it's not like they are going to do like an Ahsoka, where like Ahsoka works because we all expected there to be a second season, so they can end things in a satisfying way, but also with the door for a lot of extra storytelling. We talked about this on our last podcast episode, where they introduced the Mortis God aspect of it. I don't know if we're going to get something similar to that, but if they're going to wrap up stories or some kind of storytelling aspect of this season in the final episode, I don't know how they're going to go about doing it where it won't feel rushed.
Yeah, no idea.
So that, I think, is my biggest complaint about this episode with regards to where it falls in the story. And also just kind of with the series, this is kind of a general gripe with the series, but again, the lack of Star Wars having longer episodes to tell some of these stories feels like a poor choice. Again, I don't want to judge it completely until the finale's out, but I do feel like having a couple more episodes possibly to space, like even if they did like what Andor did and have 12 episodes or something like that, where you get a little bit more story. If you're going to keep to these 30-minute episodes, then you do 30-minute episodes, but you allow some more things to breathe and work
two more episodes, I think, for this series would have been helpful. A solid 10 would have been helpful.
Yeah, just to give things a little bit more chance to breathe. Some of the stuff, again, it's the same complaints I've had when we've talked about some of the other episodes. Some of the pacing felt rushed. Some of the moments, I think, genuinely, if we hadn't seen the events of this episode from the other perspective, then it would have been hard for them to make this episode its own standalone episode.
Yeah.
Because so much of it was overlapped. But yeah, I'll be curious to see how they land this thing, because there's a lot that they need to address and they have not done yet.
Yeah, there's so much more to Chimera's story that they got 30 to 50 minutes to go to tell us. So it just felt weird that he wasn't in this. The placement for the flashbacks episode just feels so weird and wrong. But
I get where they're going with it, because they clearly set up the flashback last week. Like, I'm going to tell you, like, I've been waiting 16 years to tell you what actually happened. So we knew that this was coming. But I think even when we were talking about the show way back when, either during one of our earlier recaps or even during possibly our speculation episode that we did for the podcast, you didn't think that they were going to do another full episode that was a flashback episode.
Yeah, I didn't think they had time. And here we are. Still don't have time.
So we'll see if they if that was the right choice or not. Scale of 1 to 10, what are you going to rate this episode?
7.
It's respectable.
Yeah, 7.
Respectable. I'm right.
I'm great.
Yeah. I'm right about there, like maybe 6.5, 7. Like, again, I don't think there was any issue with the acting. I think the acting was pretty good.
Yeah.
The questions that we had answered were really good, but the placement of the episode is a huge drawback for me. And as stupid as it is, the fact that we don't know whose perspective is hearing the story from is something that kind of drives me nuts, because then I feel like that's going to be something that has to be addressed next week, that then takes away from whatever else they need to address next week.
Yeah.
And the episode length. I feel like if you're going to dive into some of this stuff, maybe either tack it onto another episode or make these episodes longer, because sometimes it feels like there's stuff that they could have done in other episodes and then free up another episode to tell more story or flesh out more character or something like that.
Yes.
So, but that's going to do it for this week's episode recap.
All right. If you are new here, you are watching us for the first time, you are listening to us for the first time. So if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you're listening to us on whatever platform you're listening to us on, please hit that rate button, 5 stars, whatever it is. That's super helpful for us. Todd, where can they find you on the internets?
You can find me posting food because I've been posting so much Acolyte inspired food on basically every social media platform: Instagram, X, Facebook, Discord, at Todd Knows Best, and that's the nose like the one on your face.
All right, and I am BP the Maker on every platform. Todd just mentioned it. Join our Discord. There's a link in the bio below and a link in the description for the episode. We talk a lot in there about collecting and pretty much everything Star Wars. A lot of things go on in there, and it's pretty active, which is great. Oh geez, oh yeah, these episodes are weekly until it ends, and then we have a bi-weekly episode as well. That is a fuller, longer podcast episode, closer to an hour-ish or an hour and a half-ish. But I guess until next time, remember, the Force will be with you always.